I don't know how well this can be used. I don't know how well those can be used in the forums that are out there for this work, but that's certainly my starting point for what I think needs to happen. And Brad, if you want to go next.
Dwayne, would you type in those modalities that you have
Sure.
familiar with next to your name? Thank you.
Sure. Hi, Brad. I'm actually a very political person, and especially right now, we pretty much have to be very political because everything is at stake. And I do believe that there's a really interesting opportunity to go beyond the duopoly and the partisanship that we're in right now. I think that the Democrats are obviously not up to the challenge, and either we need to either take them over from within with a larger, better vision, or replace them. And I've talked previously about the planetary political party idea, which I'm very enthusiastic about. And I actually think that even a lot of people don't want to be involved in politics. And I think that if you just think of the I think there's a really interesting opportunity to do a collective sense-making process among few or many around what are the things that matter to us in the future. And that's essentially an agenda or a platform. And it's also an expression of a worldview that could be the third attractor. So that's kind of where I would like to go.
Glad you're here, Brad. Would you pass it to someone else, please?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Brian, did you already go?
No, I'd be happy to.
Okay.
Brian Patterson with the Climate Foundation here on the Sunshine Coast of Queensland, Australia. Good morning, everyone, and unceded Jinibara territory. Yeah, we're at a poly crisis, and I think we need to get very serious about providing the kind of political resistance that'll be necessary to hold the line for the next year and a half, and then cause a little inaction in Congress in 2 years. Over to Michelle.
Me? Well, I'm here because I agree. I see this divide. For those who don't know, I host the regenerative governance call, and we don't talk a lot about government there. We're talking about governance in other contexts mostly, but in the regenerative movement, I don't think we can ignore it. And I think we're the people to have the conversation, and we're the people to work on bridging the divide. We need us all. We need to find out I appreciate what you said, Brad, what matters to us and how do we move that forward together, whether we agree on the nature of reality or not, or the nature of things. What can we do? How can we move forward about what matters to us together? And how do we set that up? I'm going to call on AJ. AJ?
Hey, this is Ajay.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm calling from the San Francisco Bay Area. I am collaborating with Dave Witzel on an unconference coming up and volunteer with Regeneration Pollination. And I also coordinate the East Bay Permaculture Guild here. I'm interested in, this possibility for moving away from politics personally, I would love to be, I don't know if the word should be apolitical or anti-political, but this paradigm is just so broken and not in the interest of earth care, people care, fair share. But I'm also like, politics is a great soap opera. I find it very fascinating, and I don't know if there's a way to like harvest that energy so we can get what we want. Check. I'll pass it to and pay attention to everyone who went. I don't even know who's here and who's a ghost. Did you go, Mithra?
Hi. I'm Mitra. I'm in Byron Bay, Australia. Long involvement in permaculture and then regen. Been worried about the rise of conspiracy nonsense since before the pandemic. Saw it as a big threat and saw that accelerate and include some very previously solid people during the pandemic. And now even more concerned that as the US descends into fascism, how those of us both in the US and elsewhere, and those may be different responses, react, especially when it becomes even clearer as the midterms probably don't happen or don't actually bear resemblance to an election. So yeah, very concerned that this space, the regenerative space, has got kind of infiltrated by that nonsense thinking, fascist thinking. We've seen a bunch of there's a National Regenerative Day thing in Australia, which seems to have been taken over by the far right, and seeing them pop up in multiple places. So I'll pass it to who hasn't gone. Sage.
Hi everyone, I'm Sage Harper, talking to you from North Carolina. My background is military operations, strategic planning, government contracting, and now regeneration. Because of my military background, I'm not saying I'm apolitical, but I try to look more from a systems perspective viewpoint than a politics viewpoint. And I try to get down to root cause when we're having discussions on things, because a lot of times systems are agenda pushing over root cause of what's going on, and it's sort of equal, a different conversation. My whole idea and what I would bring to this is really sort of a perspective of designing systems that remain functional regardless of political shifts. I think practical facilitation methods and practical economics and regenerative movement makes us bulletproof. So that's hopefully where maybe I can help. I pass it on to Martha. I don't think you've gone yet.
No, not yet. Thanks, Sage. So I'm currently in Switzerland. I'm originally from the Northeast, New England and New York. My background is in clothing industry and textiles, but I'm completely disinterested in fashion these days, and have really, I became familiar. I learned about regenerative agriculture, and then I realized, oh, natural fibers, bioregional natural fibers could play a really, really important role. And I teach English as well, and it's always interesting when I teach, if I have a group, to see people across all sorts of different, from all different backgrounds coming together with the common goal of learning a language. I always like to put people together who might be have different sort of prejudices when they join the group. So I'm really interested in craft and making, and I think that the things that we make, that we have throughout the human history made from the materials that the land produces, whether it's textiles or it's tools, I think it's a common language that spans generations, eons, and cultures. And I really love the idea of bringing people together to make stuff. So when I taught English, I thought, oh, it would be really interesting. And I was working on some embroidery projects too with refugees, and I thought it'd be really interesting to get the SP, the Socialist Party, and the SVP, which is the Social Folks Party, which is the far right, to get people together and get like a bunch of women together and let's just make stuff. Let's knit, let's embroider. A lot of these crafts, these traditions are really still living on in the people who might, in the cultures, communities that might be a little bit more land-based and more, to the right of where I am. And so I would say I am pretty apolitical at this point. I want to find ways to build bridges and help people reconnect with their place through the things that have been made there, the things that can still be made, to start to realize that actually they don't have to buy stuff cheap at Walmart or wherever, that there are maybe still some craftsmen in the area. So yeah, so I feel like craft and making is like a universal language, and we could really we could have peace, peace through craft is kind of my thing. Tristan, have you spoken yet?
I have not. Thanks. Yeah, Tristan, I am currently living in Monterey, California. I'm a half Swedish, half American, so dual citizen. Have spent time living in both places. I have a background in media production, marketing, advertising, anything kind of related to that, and just a general passion for storytelling and the paradox of what it means to be a good human, which is loaded with a lot of subjectivity. Yeah, so I also consider myself, I picked up this term while I was living in Stockholm. It's called bubble hopping, and I now I could say that I relate to that term. That growing up, I had many friends in many different circles, many different types of friends, and still do. I have friends that I disagree with greatly. We have some of the same values and we have some different values. But I hope that it makes me a better person and makes them a better person as well in the long term. So yeah, happy to be here. Very curious to see where this conversation goes.
Can you pass it on, Tristan?
And let's see, I'm looking at all the, has Dennis spoken?
Dennis and David may be all that are left.
Then Dennis, if he's here.
Yeah. Let me get the camera on here. Yeah, so I'm in actually I'm in Santa Cruz right now, not too far from you, Tristan. Yeah, I have friends who are like, I guess, religious right, and longtime friends. So can't agree at all on like the structure of the world. Like the world is flat, really. There's all kinds of religious things, even though I'm a Christian too. I don't agree with this one of these guys with. I value his friendship. He's a good friend, a loyal friend. We're both musicians and we love to play music together. And that's fine. It's not, we can't talk about politics or how the world is built. Those are two small areas, that's fine. I think when it comes down to it though, what really matters is like when it affects, your freedoms, the things you can say and you can't say, that matters, right? If it affects like whether or not someone's going to betray you or whatever for just being yourself, that matters, right? We have to have some kind of common ground in regeneration world and agriculture. And I love the concept about peace through craft. I agree. We need to ground ourselves in what really matters to our species survival and our harmony on this planet long term. And that's what really matters. And I think that's probably what I hope both extremes are getting at. Although I think there's a lot of manipulation, exploitation for selfish purposes going on too, and for greedy purposes. But to me, the way I see this playing out is we're getting a lesson on greed. This is who we are. Do we want to be led by? Do we want to admire people who have a lot of money? Does that give them a right to lead us? I don't know. That's the question I see proposed to me right now. And also, what am I made of? How am I going to stand up? I can't change it. My business is named Regeneration Leadership. If regeneration is one of those key words, you can't say I'm out of business or I need to change my business. I'm not going to do that because it's who I am. It's important to me and I'm going to stand up for it regardless. So that's where I'm coming from there.
Thanks, Dennis. And David.
Yeah, thanks. I was actually I'm going to put in a plug for Colleen. So Colleen Dick is one of the people who's kind of has provoked this conversation for me. She's probably the only person that's not, I don't know. She's one of the few people left in GRC who is willing to kind of put forth kind of the right wing, I don't know how we want to classify things, position on some of these issues. And she's been able to do it kind of consistently and patiently. And then Colleen and I have arguments like on Facebook and stuff and other venues and kind of witness the political divide, if you will. So I feel like there's a lot of common grounds around the regeneration framing, a lot of dispersion around the politics, and that that split is troubling. So she couldn't make this session, but she did send a couple of kind of observations about, how we might be thinking about this session. So I just posted those in to the chat. And then as for myself, let me just also give her. And Mitra, you provoked this in many ways too, right? Because you posted on Slack about people representing Zach Bush coming in Australia and being promoted, I think, by right-wing legislators or something like that. You can give more context. And so it was interesting to see that it's crossing national borders, I guess, was part of the provocation. I came into regeneration kind of 10 12 years ago, where like a light bulb went off that we could be, instead of be less bad, we could be better. Kind of, I felt like I'd been doing a lot of work in the environmental space, helping to make the world less bad, or reduce carbon consumption, or reduce pollution, or reduce electricity consumption, and like none of those things were going to be good enough, kind of. And so when I stumbled into the notion of regeneration, thanks largely to David Hodgson, I said, wow, that's it. We could, if we all got around this idea that nobody's going to argue with the world being better, and one of the notions was, if you go to a regenerative agriculture, go to a regenerative farm, you really experience, like what regeneration means, right? Because you can smell it, you can see the biodiversity, you can see that, that it's beautiful. You can touch the, the ground and feel it help. So it was like, wow. And farming is one of these places where we have this great opportunity to really cross political boundaries, because, red and blue are going to agree on regeneration, right? And so I've managed to get my utopianism back in check a little bit better, and realize it wasn't going to be that easy. But I still feel like there must be an opportunity, maybe in the politics, for our regenerative future, because we're on both sides of the barrier. And I feel like we also could just totally destroy our chances, kind of, in some sense, our play, if you will, by not being able to talk to each other and support each other and stuff like that. So I'm really glad we're having this conversation. I'm really looking forward to it. And I kind of hope, I don't know, Michelle, if there's any kind of exhaust we could create, but at some point we should like summarize this and publish it or something, assuming we make some progress. Or maybe we publish it, we don't make progress too.
Yeah. I want to invite everybody to take a minute. I just want to read the suggestions from Colleen just silently to myself, and invite y'all to, and then we'll welcome Gil in, and then we'll start our next round. All wise reminders, very wise reminders, and things that I definitely want to include and expand on as we come up with some cultural agreements about how we'll be in the space, as we have the conversation, and perhaps that we might use in all our spaces in the GRC, and keep in mind. Gil, I don't know if you know everybody. We've just done a round of introducing ourselves and what brings us into the space. And just I did a quick reminder that this conversation is about processes and how we might have, it was more meta, how do we have the conversation? Not so much, because we're not here to have a debate on analysis today.
So real quick, hi everybody who I don't know. I'm Gil Friend. I'm in Berkeley, California. I'm a longtime sustainability Mitra strategist and consultant, mostly to large corporates. Was CSO for City of Palo Alto, and lately working primarily as an ontological coach for leaders and emerging leaders in the sustainability, regeneration, transformation space. And I'm sorry to be late. I had a client call before that, but I wanted to pop in for two reasons. Well, I was curious about the premise that I saw about keeping keeping politics out of regen, which I think is an impossible feat and probably the wrong question. But
I don't think that was ever the question.
That's what showed up. That's what showed, let me just finish saying. That's what showed up in the invite that I saw. So I was provoked by that. But what I see here about Mitra's post about concern about the regen narrative being co-opted by the right wing feels more on target to me, and also a complicated question because we want it to be adopted broadly. So interesting mystery. Glad to
We
be.
definitely don't want it to get broken down before it can catch a lot of good hold.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Always a risk.
yeah. So I posted the invitation, given that folks in the regenerative movement chose different and sometimes polarizing political identities and strategies. How might we move forward together in ways that reflect regenerative principles and values? And so this conversation is about how do we have the conversation? Do I have any, who are my facilitators in the room? People with some facilitator chops. I know Daryl, you have a familiarity with some things. Anyone else do much facilitation? All right. Well, Gil has, I'm sure. So from that perspective of when we're having a conversation, when we're hosting a conversation, when we're convening and welcoming and hosting people into a space, where people have a lot of strong, they're protecting things that are tender and valuable and important. I am protecting things that are very, not just abstract, but like here in my skin, things that I'm afraid could happen to this entity here, as well as others I love. So when we come in here with a lot that we're protecting, I appreciate Colleen's sending those things. Some of the first thing I think we want is some agreement around, well, one thing is, what is the purpose of this conversation? Are we trying to what would be the purpose? And then what are our cultural agreements for how to have the conversation? And then what's going to be the format, right? What's going to be the format for having it? Yes, Brad. I see your hand.
I just have a framing I might throw out there.
Uh-huh.
I mentioned the third attractor earlier. I don't know if sorry, I'm a little out of breath because I'm on a stationary bike. Everybody familiar with the third attractor concept? Basically, the idea is that
Yeah, you're going to explain it.
yeah, basically the idea is that we currently have two attractors, chaos and authoritarianism, that humanity is moving towards. And can we manifest a third attractor that gets us somewhere better than those two? And I think that in the context of politics, I would say that our manifesting or expressing a worldview that, first of all, a third attractor won't happen unless you have a good expression of what it is, right? And to me, I've been thinking of regeneration as the third attractor, as the thing that we could all move towards because it's so much better. But what does that mean? And so I think no one has really, no one individually or collectively yet that I'm aware of has really articulated contract with the planet, if you will. You know, what the right wing did with Contract with America. You know, no, we haven't made have a concise expression of what is that future we're looking towards. So anyway, that's just a framing that I think is a useful way of thinking about what are we trying to accomplish here. I don't want to. I'm personally not interested in the minutia of the Democrats versus the Republicans or right wing versus left. It's like, what is that future that we can articulate and really get everybody behind instead of staying polarized.
Thank you. Anyone who wants to add to my notes, I'm putting notes in the chat. So if you want to add to my notes, or if I put anything wrong, please, or anything you want to do there, please take self-responsibility for making sure that what you want to say is there. I see your hand, Mitra, and it is a lot easier
Yes,
for the electronic hands if it's possible, but I saw
I
your,
can't. Sorry, I
yeah.
can't find the electronic hands on the mobile version. I'm usually using the desktop version, but I'm at a farmer's market at the moment. Listening to everyone's introductions, I hear three different motives, and they may be representative of the GRC space as a whole. One motive was fascism and how we fight it. How do we participate in the fight against fascism? The second and these are different motives that different people have, and they overlap. One is the concern about the co-option of regeneration by the far right and conspiracy theories. And the third is splits in the regen movement caused by political division. So one is whether we're preserving society from, whether we as part of regen are preserving society from fascism, or whether we as regen are concerned about regen being disrupted by the polarization. And those, I think, are three different perspectives, all valid, but may lead to different kinds of solutions.
So let me grab those, Mitra. So one is the fascism, and does regen movement have a role in resisting it? That's
Yes.
one thing that you've heard in our introductions. The other is, the second is, say it again.
The co-option of regeneration by the far right and conspiracy theorists.
Blood and
People who think the earth is flat.
goes all the way back. Goes all the way back to
Co-option.
Nazi blood and land stuff.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Co-option of regeneration movement by conspiracy theory is a concern.
And far right, which we've specifically seen, which is what prompted that post I made.
This has been, if I could add, this has long been a part of some of the far right. This shows up in the early Nazi writing. This is the blood and land movement, which had a regeneration flavor to it potentially.
Right.
Right, but we haven't seen it so much in the regen space before, the co-option by the far right. Like someone posting a poster of Trump with a bunch of tulips and promoting Trump on a National Regen Day thing is not something we've seen before.
Yeah, maybe not. Mitra, what was the third frame?
The concern that I've heard from some people, which is more concern of how do you keep regen together when you have different political views within it.
Yeah. And I'm going to say that as a movement, how do we keep it coherent, even if there are these far different perspectives? Or is that right, Mitra? How do we keep it coherent?
That's the third, yeah. And actually, Brad posted a fourth one in the chat. Maybe you want to mention that, Brad.
Yeah, I would just say that those three all seem reactive to me, like we're reacting to things as opposed to, articulating, a better vision. And not even dealing with fascism, because fascism becomes obviously unattractive by comparison.
Well, and that's like Colleen's first thing. Don't start by calling people names, right? Like the labeling. But what I'm hearing, Mitra, is these three motives that you heard and concerns that are in there. I'm going to say that my understanding of what first initiated was more the third of like, how do we keep the regenerative movement coherent, even if there are these different perspectives in the, on it at present. And also, I'm still looking at this. Well,
the second one was the post I made that started the conversation, right? And then David, not unreasonably, brought up the third one, which is how do we stop the split?
Right.
Which is an issue that we had at the permaculture convergence a couple of years ago as a major issue.
So, and this fourth one, which I think is also aligned with what my understanding is, can the regen present an alternative that is so attractive that it moves us towards where we want to go, whether or not anybody agrees on, again, the nature of the political problem or the political strategies, whether we agree on strategies all the time or not. What are the strategies we can move forward together on? I saw your hand, Gil.
Yeah, I think to me what Brad said is kind of the wrapper around the whole thing. It's not a different point or at the same level. It's sort of a meta to the whole thing. It's what we're trying to do is have a compelling alternative that attracts momentum. And
I'm not sure, yeah, because I'm not sure everyone would see a danger that you see, Mitra, and everyone in the regenerative movement would not see those first two as risks.
wait, Michelle, I don't have the sense that you heard what I said.
I beg your pardon, Gil. And I can't, I did hear it, but I would love for you to say it
Okay,
again.
so I'm suggesting that what Brad offered is not at the same level as the three that Mitra offered. It's a meta
Yeah,
wrapper to those
yeah.
three. So I wouldn't put it at the same level.
Yeah.
To the three, Mitra, I don't know what happened at the permaculture convergence, but from my perspective, I'm not as concerned with maintaining coherence in a movement that is at its early stages, which is going to be by its nature diverse and varied and conflicting, and maybe that's okay. But maybe you have a different perspective on that.
Well, we at the permaculture convergence, this was immediately post-pandemic, and so there was a bunch of the permaculture space that had differing opinions on the pandemic, and that was probably healable. But a lot of them had then started associating with some of the far right people who were the big anti-lockdown organizers. So the far right took over the anti-lockdown movement, and then permaculture people got associated with that, and that brought a lot of disrespect to the permaculture space, and it ended up the permaculture convergence actually wasn't too bad. The conversations were mostly very positive. But part of that process has also been a split, for example, a splitting off in the Facebook groups to an evidence-based permaculture group, for example, which is one of the most interesting spaces in Australia now, because it's people who are just, we're not going to have a conversation based on a set of bullshit. We're going to move forward around facts. If you think the earth is flat, you do not belong in here.
So they've chosen that space. So yeah, do you feel heard now, Gil, by me?
I sure do. Thank you.
Okay, great. I'm going to recognize Brian and then Martha.
Thank you, Michelle. This reminds me a bit of, I mean, I've done some facilitation through sociocracy frameworks. And when you have a circle like this, and let's consider regen circles here and in the future, it's very helpful to come up with a vision, mission, and aims that achieve consent, not consensus. And then furthermore, to progress beyond that, and that's how it can be a guiding star. I mean, proposals can be evaluated against vision, mission, and aims and facilitated in a way to achieve objectives with smarter decisions as a result. I think we should also ask the question of whether all governance frameworks are created equal. I think they may not be. And there's something that, I mean, there's a lot of permaculture and marine permaculture that takes place. I've worked with Dave Holmgren on applying the dozen permaculture design principles to the marine environment. And we're very interested in doing that for the social environment. And I would simply ask whether our vision, mission, and aims can be put together in a way. I mean, I think we do need, given the assumption that all governance frameworks are not created equal when it comes to politics and government, we should ask the question about, you know, what kinds of action, including political action, the regenerative movement needs to consider in order to achieve its aims. And so that's what I would offer at the present. Thanks.
We need a lobbyist, huh?
Well, there is some of that. I'm actually going to be meeting next week with David Fenton, who is probably one of the masters of progressive public relations. And I'm going to give you two quotes from his YouTube last week on climate chat. He said, "We are in a propaganda war, and the problem is only one side is on the field, and it's not us." What he means by that is there has never been a well-funded public relations campaign to actually inform the center of America, for example, about the truth when it comes to how climate is going to affect their lives, their property, and the lives of their children. And until such time as that well-funded public relations campaign is put forward, we're not even on the playing field when it comes to figuring out the future of America and dozens of other countries. Thanks.
So part of this, how we move, how do we save the regenerative movement has this public relations and communicating the narrative and, owning the narrative. Yeah.
Yeah, Dave, I'll post a couple links, especially I recommend everybody see Dan Miller's climate chat from 2 weeks ago. He had David Fenton on, and it was just like waking up. It was like just waking up to what we need to get serious about.
Yeah. I see you, Martha.
So Michelle, what you said at the beginning about pain, that people are really, things that people really care about, things that people really love. And I feel that as well with Colleen. I think, this may sound very simplistic, but I think that even if we want to have a PR campaign.
We are
and all sorts of-
live and welcome to Climate Chat.
I don't think that's me.
All right.
I think the first thing to do is to try to understand where other people are coming from. People are not, generally just sort of crazy. There's a starting point, and like, what are the things that people are afraid of? What is it that they're wanting to protect? So I would say it's like sort of the beginner's mind approach, like just to go in first, creating a space, an environment where people feel really safe to speak from their hearts, because nothing's going to change as long as we each think that we're smarter than the others and that they don't really get it. So if we just talk louder, they'll get it. And I think we experienced that during COVID, where there was such a divide. And what is it? What was it? Who was it? Brian or so, who said about like the hippies? Yeah, it was just crazy to me to see how people were fighting. People I come from more of like the sustainability, when it was still an okay word, 30 years ago. So I just think that we need to listen, because if we don't find ways to really, really hear and honor others who have a different point of view, then we're not going to find a way for everyone to play a role in trying to protect this beautiful earth that we live on. So yeah, maybe
A process that allows us to really hear each other, that gives space to safely be heard and have their concerns and what matters to them be seen and included.
And respectfully. Just one little quick anecdote. Whenever I go back to the States and I have to drive a lot, which I don't have to do in Europe, I always listen to NPR. And I remember right after the first, Trump election, listening to a woman from a dairy farm family in Wisconsin talking about how they were losing so many of their really valued family member workers who had been part of their family for generations, that were fleeing to Mexico because they were afraid that ICE was going to come and grab them. So, and she said, we just didn't really think it was going to happen. But, okay, so why, we could say, oh, well, you should have thought before you voted, but why did they vote? Really understanding. I have a lot of compassion for farmers and workers, the former left wing, so I think we just really need to know where people are hurting and see how we can, support one another. I think you're muted, Michelle. I should be muted, but you're muted.
That's going to be, thank you. That's going to be definitely part of creating the processes to have that value of safety. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, thanks, Martha, because that's really helpful to me. And I guess And so from a personal perspective, I feel like I've been trying to listen and engage, and some of it's been shouting louder. Um, and I feel like I've kind of hit a wall a little bit. So that's one of the reasons I'm glad we're doing this series. And I'd love to have ways that like maybe are more than listening or something, or is there what's the agile opportunity where we can experiment and
Right.
what are the creative engagements we can do or something like that, the interactions
The listening is a
that could
part
get
of
this
developing something. The listening is a part
something
of
like that.
it's the strategy for
Yeah, yeah.
developing it. It's not, and
I mean, the
it's
listening is
not a,
definitely
it's not an
necessary, but
outcome.
maybe
It's not an outcome.
can we, how do we, yeah, exactly, right. I feel like, I have a kind of a theory of the case around the, how do we get to the regenerative future, which is that lots of people, and from a lot of it's from watching the GRC, people have come into this space from very different perspectives. And, some of them are permaculture, some of them are landscape architecture. I think the internet has a tendency to bring people in. Climate change, the worry about the poly crisis there. But so people come in with a kind of an original motivation, but then they start to see, well, what Brad was saying about this potential in the future. And that's the movement, right? It's that vision, that shared vision. I think that's the opportunity. So I've interpreted it as like, well, we have to kind of like have all these lenses, overlapping in some way that is that has then political power and is able to move the future. And one of the things is like, but when the lenses seem so they overlap, but then they are so opposed. You have both in the same lens, kind of. And for example, the Regeneration International group, which is one of the ways I got into regeneration, is organized by the Organic Consumers Association, the lobbyist firm, and the Organic Consumers Association, like, a couple of years ago, was like vocally calling for Fauci to be arrested. And I just couldn't bring those two things together, and I think it's the magic of Facebook, but I've been getting fed Zach Bush videos on Facebook, and they're like 3 minutes long, and they're excellent. They're really well done. And half of what he says is like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then he'll go, and then we need telepathy with trees or something. And I'll go, whoa, where did that come from? You know, and so it's like a lot of the material, and I don't know exactly who he is, or I don't know his background, or I don't know his politics really, but the storytelling he's doing is tremendous. I would love to have his storytelling as an ally, in this regenerative future. Is that trusted? Could I do that and and feel good about myself? I don't know.
I'm gonna go with Brad, and then I'm gonna put myself in the stack.
Yeah, Dave, I was sort of going to say the same thing. I don't have a lot of time or energy for listening to people that can't be convinced. I'm not going to try and convince people or even, argue a better alternative. I think the alternative to that kind of listening is solidarity. I've been really active with the local Indivisible lately, going to marches and all that, and this is an agricultural county. Sonoma County is it does have, it's pretty liberal, but there's plenty of Trumpers here, a lot of farmers, and there's a lot of solidarity with farmers. And I think when you show up and from the left, and you're supporting the postal workers and the veterans and the farmers and the immigrants in their needs, right? You're showing solidarity with them. You don't have to argue with them. Maybe half of them are on your side, but half of the veterans probably did vote for Trump and didn't realize that he was going to do the harm that he's doing to them. So I think solidarity with people is a good way of letting them know that you're not just somebody on the other side trying to convince them of something, but more you're an ally.
Thank you. I'm gonna let Mitra go, and then I'm gonna go. I can't hear you, Mitra.
Sorry. One of my concerns is I'm not sure, as I think it was Brad said, that we're even in the game, right? We're we're focused on how do we listen to people, while the far right is putting out disinformation that in many cases the creators of that disinformation know is disinformation, right? So it's a different game, and putting things together that are we're even afraid to use the term fascism, right? So I don't think we're playing the game at all.
I think plenty of people are using the word fascism, and it's not helping. It's not getting anybody together. And so here's what I'm going to say. I see this happening very clearly locally here. Like this is the same thing we saw. Like a lot of it started with COVID and with different perspectives on how to keep themselves healthy through a pandemic and through a virus. And there were, you know, views of that were very suspicious of the corporate pharmacies' influence on the rulemaking and the narrative of that, and the even ability to have had or even talk about alternatives to vaccines for protecting against viruses, and that's and there in here in North Carolina. I mean, a ton of my permaculture people that I've worked side by side, dug holes with, planted food with, shared corn with, like deep relational work. We share values. We chose different strategies. And it's always going to be at the level of strategy that conflict occurs. So if the view, Mitra, like I'm not interested in a conversation to change people's minds about what they think is the nature of whatever. I'm really not. I'm not in here. I just wanted to make that point. I'm not neutral in this fight, in this not fight, this conversation. What I am for and what I'm very, what I'm here for and going to spend time in is more this idea of, and even in this moment, of shaping a proposal for how does the regenerative movement move forward? What can we move forward together? How do we claim a narrative around the future we want? Because that future we want is shared. And so listening to what matters to people about the future we want is and then seeing, does that fit into the regenerative principles and systems? That's the conversation that has been initiated here. So I want you to be heard in that conversation, Mitra, about what matters to you and what scares you and what's important to you going forward. And I want anybody else to feel that way too, to have that space. I'm going to stand for that. So, okay, I'm going to pause and Brian, I want to say that I come out of sociocracy. My work is sociocracy is the legacy of the work that I do, and use a lot of, and the principle of consent is a value in my whole life, that comes out at every level of governance, from my personal self-governance to the world. So the principle of consent and the processes, like that, the sociocratic process is a nice, simple container. There are others, but what we're trying to get to is, a strategy we can move forward on together. I'd love to take the last little bit and start to shape maybe a proposal for the conversation, but I'm going to go ahead and let you talk, Brian, and then maybe we can.
Sure. So, I mean, the start for a sociocratic process is to identify first within this group a vision, mission, and aims that does align well with everything that we want to bring forward, and then ideally to federate that vision, mission, and aims with other regenerative groups to create a movement. And then the circle decisions and policy frameworks fall directly out of the proposals that are evaluated against those visions, missions, and aims. And so I would simply suggest that provides an outline or a blueprint for actions that we can take to build consent within our regenerative circles.
I think it would start with that vision, like that's where this conversation would start.
Yeah, and I'll just offer one, and that is my good friend Peter Fikowski has proposed a decade ago that all of us want a healthy climate for our children. And maybe that's part of where we start. Our
Maybe.
basis for further refinement.
Yeah, well-being, I think, is a good one that comes to mind as well. Brad?
Yeah, so I'm going to do a quick screen share before the show is over. I haven't done sociocracy per se, Brian, but super interested in it. And I've been around liquid democracy for a long time. And some of you guys have seen a previous version of this, but I'd like to propose that maybe I've been positioning it as exactly the kind of exercise you're talking about around vision, mission, and principles. And the idea is, I don't know if you guys can see it. I'll give you the link here in a second. It's a poll. Okay, this is a code of poll. And anyone can suggest a new row in the poll. And anyone can vote. I'm going to clear my vote on that one, and then I can now vote again. It takes a little time to update. And notice my name, I went away from there. At least I should have. And so this is all built into code. I didn't write this.
I'm going to wait, Brad. I want to bring this back
Yeah.
in a way
Yeah,
when we
that's
have
fine.
time.
Just the
to-
whole idea is this can be 3 people, it can be a million people.
Yeah.
And it's really about a consensus around a long tail of what matters to us. And it's very doable now.
I agree. And we saw this, and then I haven't come back to I didn't get to go back and try it. There was some.
Yeah, that was the previous version, and it's
Yeah.
getting handleable now. So anyway.
Let's just pause with some silence. I want to see if we can't look at this and maybe craft a little bit of a purpose for the next call and then think about I'll be thinking about the process format of doing that. It'd probably be some version of convergent facilitation. And I can put a link to that. Yeah, Mitra.
Yeah, I guess I have a lot of concerns here. Right. I like sociocracy. I've never seen it working where you didn't have all the participants willing to put a hell of a lot of time into working with the process.
Only authoritarianism is quick. Everything else takes time.
It's totally, but I mean, if you want a process that involves people who are not totally committed to it, which is most of the regen movement are not going to be totally committed to this process. There's going to be a small set of people who are, and they're willing to go through a sociatic process, but you're not going to bring people in with the overhead required.
I would argue that the poll that I just showed is real time. It doesn't take any time at all. It's real time.
We're not going to just use a sociocratic process. We're not going to put in social. We're going to have a conversation, probably going to use convergent facilitation, and then we're going to do the next thing. We're not.
And sorry, I was halfway through saying something. That the other side of that is, someone mentioned the vision. We all want a healthy climate, right? You can put together a vision that's so fuzzy that it doesn't address the very real problem, which is the attempted takeover of regen by the far right. So, or whatever the other couple of problems that people have identified are. If a vision is so fuzzy that it's just like, oh, everyone can agree with it, but it doesn't actually lead to anything. So that's my concern from what I'm hearing about the direction this is going. That this won't be relevant to actually the far right in regen. It'll be, oh, we're fuzzy, we're going to think about what a beautiful future is.
Well, that's why you start with vision, and then you do the next, you build out from that. That's a reason to start from. What is it, this future what is the conversation, right? Like, what is the theme of the conversation is what we're trying to come up with. Brian's suggesting that what is our vision for the future of the planet? What is it? What I'm suggesting that with that, we say, what matters to us in terms of that? There's a suggestion around what is our narrative, creating our narrative around that. But how do we save regeneration from this political divide such that it can be that third attractor, so that it can present a something to go toward that's compelling enough to, pull people away from, to just like make chaos and autocracy get out of the way or be, managed. It's a big freaking task. It's a big deal.
And,
There's a
and
lot-
Michelle, that's because what you've just focused on there is the third of those goals, which is trying to save regen from splitting, which is some of the people on this call, that's their main goal. For others, that's not their main goal.
Okay. What else can be added to that goal?
Well, either of those other two
Maybe-
goals, which is how do you participate as part of the movement against fascism, or how do you stop the regen movement being co-opted by fascism?
So these
Those
are
are,
some
those are two
important
separate goals from the third one. I'm not saying your goal is invalid, not in any way. It's only one of the three goals I've heard of.
Well, then there was also the fourth one that Brad put up too. Any more? What else?
I'd like to explore that a little more. Let's say the movement splits, or I think it's already splitted. So what? As long as we don't like conflict or compete against each other, like if we're working side by side on a single farm, that'd be awesome. I don't care if they think the world is flat. I'll dig a ditch with them, for better water irrigation, right? Or dig a swale. That's fine. I have no problem with that at all. Now, if we start competing and sabotaging each other's efforts, that's a problem. That's war, right? We don't want that. We want to be able to get along somehow, even if our ideological perspective is different.
And aren't we at war when we're just saying you're a fascist? No, you're a fascist. Isn't that just war?
No, not if they're owning that name, if they want to be fascist and they think that's a great thing for humanity, fantastic.
They're pointing the finger at liberals and calling them fat.
Oh yeah, just call us what is it, snowflakes and stuff like that.
Right.
We have to wrap our arms around why people are behaving in this way, why they have the perspective, understand that and validate it to some degree. I agree. Yeah, name calling is useless, but we should let them own their own names. If they're calling themselves fascist, we'll call them fascist. Fine.
What matters to them, and what are they afraid of? That's
what are they trying to accomplish? Yeah, exactly. Maybe we share some same goals.
And what is it? Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're really trying to bring in folks who have bad intentions of, enslaving people.
No, this is why we do need separation.
Rights from people.
Yeah, I think splitting is a good thing when you have situations like that.
But I'll tell you what, I don't care if you believe in if you're worried about engineering or whatever and chemtrails. I don't care.
Well,
I don't care.
That's what I like about the poll is that anybody can put in right to life. You can put in geoengineering.
Right to life is strategy. That's the thing I want to talk about these things, because right to life is strategy.
What I'm saying is when you do an open poll like that, everyone's invited to put whatever they want in, but the things that rise to the top are the ones that resonate with most people. One other aspect of this is you can do it by invitation. So you start with initial conditions that, like the GRC, if you just only the GRC people did it, then you would get some, wing nuts that put in some weird things. But the stuff that really matters, climate justice, gender equality, and not just about regen, but just what matters to us, you get this long tail of what there's a lot of resonance and consensus around, so that as people come in later, they don't move the needle as much.
I think I think you're right. I'm glad you're persisting, Brad. I think bringing that tool into this conversation, I want to work with you on the tool a little bit
Yeah, it's better than the one I showed before because it's in Coda, not bespoke.
Well, let's you and I look at
Anytime.
it, and maybe anybody else before next week. And I gotta go. It's 6 o'clock. This was supposed to be an hour. I'm really grateful for everybody. I have not gotten to a proposal yet for how to move forward, but I've got some pieces. And I'll post thoughts, and maybe we'll do it in the Slack or in a document or something, get comments around shaping a proposal. But I think you're right, Brad. I think bringing that tool in would be a really great place and way for folks, especially because we're not all in the same time zone. We chose this time at this
The one
moment.
downside of it right now that I haven't figured out around is when you try to add a new row, if you don't actually put something in for the add a principal, then you get an empty row. You can edit it, but it's fixable. But
Well, maybe we'll have
yeah,
support.
yeah,
folks
that's all right.
And if they have
Thanks
something to add, they
Thanks for
can
doing this.
add it for them.
So I want to just finish off with an example that illustrates why I think this is important. Last year, there was a big regen event organized, a lot of publicity. It was physically quite close to me. I didn't go when I saw that the lead speaker was Zach Bush. The day after, I ran into some of the speakers. A number of very good regen people were speaking. I ran into some of the speakers who were, in a car heading north at a cafe, and they said they'd had to, after the event, tell the organizers not to put their names on any of the media about the event because they did not want to be seen associated with this fruitcake. And this is not something we can ignore. This is something that's happening at a level where it's bringing the regen movement into disrepute.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. Some integrity around what regen means and it's already gotten away from us. So reclaiming what regen means is going to be a stand, I think, that might have to be taken. Okay, Brian,
Yeah, in
yes.
fact, that's one of David Fenton's principles. You have to counter misinformation in a timely way. And that's why we proposed a rapid response climate coordination hub that can actually address this kind of misinformation in a timely way. And I'm happy to relay messages to David as we seek the possibility of really mobilizing, I would say, a rapid response coordination that can actually
which David?
represent the regenerative movement. David Fenton is the guy
Oh,
I'll
okay.
be meeting
Yeah.
with next week. I'm dropping a link
thought
to
you meant
his
David
climate
Lundgren.
chat and look forward to discussing. Thank you.
We may need a narrative. I mean, there's a regen narrative channel. There may need to really boost up the regen narrative work for those who are just feeling like
Is
some
that on GRC, Michelle?
It is. There is a GRC channel.
Slack
I don't know
on
when
regen narrative.
Regen narrative. So this whatever work happens here, hopefully will need that. And also I want to just share too, part of the regen narrative. I shared this before. Is the work that Regen Governance has done to start to develop and think about and articulate regenerative principles, regenerative governance principles, governance principles that work for regenerative projects and initiatives, as well as what would it mean to govern regeneratively. So there's that in the link right now. That is in the Creative Commons, and anybody can comment. Still in development, but could help along with the work Brad's doing and this narrative work. Brian, you still got
Let me
something?
try ahead. Oh, sorry. I was just
Okay.
going to jump in on would it be interesting? Could we use Zach Bush as a case study? And the topic's kind of like what's wrong with Zach Bush or something. I mean, he's like, I don't know, he's prominent enough and he's not affiliated with us that he's almost could he be our caricature? Because I would love to get a better handle on what is the issue with, like I said, watching the videos and stuff. I don't know, I mean, to me, they're like, there's a conspiracy theory flavor to them, but they're not things that I, see as evil or anything like that. And I wonder if we could start to tease apart what it is we're seeing, if that helps us understand this at all. I don't know. Just a possible framing. The other framing that I've been wondering about in my head is this conspiracy theory thing. And I've run into I don't know if anybody's been listening to this podcast series about telepathy That's become
Yes.
quite popular. And
Oh,
I've got a couple of friends who are really into the, UFOs and space aliens are already amongst us thing. And well, certainly the anti-vax stuff. And these are things that like I feel like I'm around. And I was trying to imagine what it would take for you to convince me of these things. And I actually couldn't come up with anything. It was like, you will never convince, short of having the space alien shake my hand, you're never going to convince me. So I realized like and I probably have things that other people think are conspiracy theories, right? Or they clearly do. And, they're no more convincible than I am. So what do we mean by conspiracy theory and how do we deal with them? That was another possible topic.
right. Well, that's where you get to shared reality. Like we do not all have shared reality. I'm totally believe in telepathy and space aliens and ETs. I think that's a completely realistic and rational thing to think. And so I don't need to convince you of that, David. We share but we share because we share values, right? About regenerative future, right? We are not going to change people's reality, their vision of their how they see reality. Nobody's going to change mine. I mean, mine changes over time, and everybody's does with new information. But
It hits the
I
ground
need,
when it's like you believe that, we should have bird flu everywhere and I think we should have a vaccine.
right,
Is
or
when the two realities run against each other.
or
And that was
when,
kind of where I was wondering how do we
yeah.
find out
So,
that line?
well,
Or it hits the ground. It hits the ground when if you think that DC is run by lizard people, pedophile rings, then you don't see that it's got any worse.
I am saying that is our challenge. There may be people like that's why you create your purpose, that vision, that real clear vision that Brian's talking about. The reason you get super clear about that is because then people can self-select out. If they're not really aligned with that purpose, they will spin themselves off the wheel, off the merry-go-round. If you have the structure and the culture in place that we are returning to shared purpose and shared vision, they will select out. So I don't need for anybody to agree with, I don't have to agree. Again, I'm going to say chemtrails. I don't care if you believe in chemtrails. I'm not convinced about chemtrails because I haven't taken the time to find out. And I don't really think that's in my power. Like, I don't think I have any power over that. But I do have power over some other things, and I would work with somebody who believed in chemtrails. I would work with somebody who did not believe that the approach to the vaccines was ethical, moral, or safe. I would still work with them on something else, right? But it's always going to be, the conflict is always going to come at the level of strategy. So the listening to each other part has to include we're paying attention to each other and listening to each other so we can come up with strategies that either we can live with because our needs have gotten met, we're fine if you're, we can live with, or that we're clear, like, I'm not, we share regenerative values, but I don't support that strategy. I'm not getting behind that campaign, but that doesn't mean we're not in the regenerative movement. So that is some discerning, that is some clear work and some thinking, and it kind of can only be done collectively. And you only do collective work when you really do see other people's humanity. And you really do bring that, approach people as if there's a reason why they feel the way they feel and the reason why they chose the strategy they chose. Okay. Lecture's over. Yeah. Conflict always comes at the level of strategy, never at the level of needs. All right. I'm going to do something. I don't know what it's going to be. Me and David or Brad. Yeah. What's
Thanks,
that?
Michelle. Thanks everybody for doing this. Great
Thanks,
stuff.
I'm
everybody, for
available.
showing up. Keep
I'm
showing
available
up.
too, if you
Keep
need.
showing up. Keep
Oh,
standing for
please,
what
Martha. Yeah.
matters.
Yeah, I'm available.
What matters to you. Yeah, Martha. What did you say,
Michelle,
Martha?
I said I'm available too to contribute.
Fantastic.
Just reach
It'll
out.
be on a post and we'll figure something out. I don't know.
Perfect. Okay, great. Thanks, everyone.
All right, I might have
Love
to
these
make a call 2
conversations.
weeks from now. It might have to be 2 weeks than 1 week.
Okay.
'cause
That might make
Yeah.
sense.
2 weeks
Sure.
is good.
I'll post the
Great.
recording.
Thanks,
right.
everyone.
And the text, okay, too. Thank you, babe. Bye, y'all.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Ciao.
Bye bye.